Welcome to the Heart of CIRS podcast. I'm your hostess, Melanie Joy Pensack, here to share heartfelt conversations with folks recovering from CIRS and with those special people serving the CIRS community. The podcast was created to help bring awareness to the physical, emotional, and mental experiences of folks navigating CIRS day to day. The world needs to know what CIRS folks go through for deeper empathy and understanding. Through stories and vulnerability, we can help the world understand the winding journey of CIRS recovery. Thank you for being here to open your mind and to open your heart. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation today with Alli Manzella. Alli Manzella describes herself as a mold advocate and a CIRS survivor. She is certified in functional nutrition therapy and environmental health. She is a Western Price chapter leader and an interior designer who helps design tiny homes for Muskoka Tiny Homes. Alli also runs Is IBD Mold Toxicity on Instagram, where she shares research that points to the relationship between CIRS and gastrointestinal issues. She's also someone who really lifts others up, and I find it's rare to find women who really support each other's work so freely. She's been a big supporter of meditation for CIRS and lovely to talk to and connect to. So I'm really grateful to have her here to speak with us today. Thanks for being here, Alli.
Oh, thanks for having me, Melanie. It's good to be here.
So let's start out sharing briefly about how you developed CIRS in your late teens. Looking back now, curious to hear more about the symptoms and significant parts of your journey that you felt like are important to share with others, and anything that you felt was missed or overlooked by the traditional medical system. Feel free to take it away. Let us know what you'd like to share about your journey.
For sure. So I was actually diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease in 2000. So I was in my late teens. And of course, I didn't relate this to mold at all, but my health journey started with anxiety, which led into hormone issues, which kind of mimicked like estrogen dominance and hypothyroidism. And then it turned into a lot of stomach pain. And eventually I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. So it was a journey. And it didn't happen overnight. And I had visited a lot of doctors and I had so many questions, like, why do I feel this way? And they would send me to see someone to help me with my psychology and someone to help me with my hormones, but I really wasn't getting any answers. And then finally, it all came to a halt when I got that diagnosis, that terrifying diagnosis that my life was going to be changed forever and that I'd be on medications the rest of my life and that I probably wouldn't have children. And it was a really scary time for me. I was in my first year studying interior design in college. And I had felt like I had my whole future ahead of me. And all of a sudden, I'm being told that I don't. And I really didn't feel well. And I was also living with a roommate at the time who the same month that I was diagnosed was also diagnosed with a chronic health condition, which was stomach ulcers. So we were actually prepping together for our endoscopies and colonoscopies and trying to figure out what was wrong. And it's interesting looking back now why no one and all the doctors that I saw didn't ask about the health of my family members or people I was living with or our environment at all. Getting that diagnosis really shifted my life. And I immediately started down the path of what can I do outside of the medical system to help myself? So I started working with naturopaths and started trying all the different things with diet and herbs and supplements. Back then, we were really limited on our knowledge, but I did find a good naturopath and started doing some things which did help. And from a time for a long time, I struggled, but it wasn't until I moved out of that house that I started feeling better. And so looking back now, I can really see how my environment was hindering or helping me over the years. And I think it was in 2005, I moved into a new construction home. And I got into juice cleansing and I found the specific carbohydrate diet and I learned about detox. I went back to school to study nutrition at the Canadian College of Natural Nutrition. So I just really started taking my health seriously. And I got into colon cleansing and like parasite cleansing and working on mind body. So I was working on my traumas. I was just anything I could do, I did. And come 2008, I started taking psyllium husk powder before every meal because I was told that this was a great colon cleanse. And I think that was the last thing that I did that shifted my health. And I immediately went into a really deep remission in that time where all of my health issues disappeared. And I was feeling amazing in that time. I got married in 2009 and I had my first son in 2010, and I was pregnant and about to have my second child when we decided to buy this very old stone house. I think it was 200 years old. Beautiful acreage, beautiful, really quaint little cottage in the country. And of course, being that my husband is a contractor, home builder, and I'm an interior designer, we went full in and we gutted this house and we rebuilt it and finished it with beautiful, natural, non-toxic materials. I'm a green designer, so everything that went in there was just clean and non-toxic and natural. And the house was beautiful. So we moved in spring of 2013. And slowly but surely, all of our health started falling apart. So my youngest started developing really severe eczema. By 8 months, he was head to toe eczema. My older son, who was a brilliant little boy, by the age of 2.5, 3, he was displaying autism spectrum symptoms. He had developed tics, severe anxiety, neurological issues, a really bad stutter. So there was a point when he couldn't even get words out, which was quite terrifying. And my husband was diagnosed with chronic Lyme. So they found that he had Borrelia on conventional lab tests. He had all the symptoms, the joint pain, his knee would fill up with fluid and have to be drained. And so he was quite sick too. And we all had digestive issues. But in 2013, my issues started up again, and it was the same trajectory it was back in 2000. So it started with anxiety and an inability to handle stress, which moved into hormonal issues and thyroid issues, like hypothyroid type symptoms. And then immediately extreme stomach pain, gut issues, and ulcerative colitis flare. So that was probably within the first 6 of living in the home. And it became so incredibly severe. It was refractory to medications. I found myself in hospital multiple times, emergency visits. I had done 3 MRIs and CAT scans, and they just really couldn't figure out why I was experiencing so many symptoms outside of the gastrointestinal tract, and just kept trying to push more medication, which I accepted. But we ended up spending copious amounts of money trying to get our family well, which is a struggle for a lot of people who deal with chronic illness. But we were really working at the root causes and really trying to figure it out. And we, as a family, were working together because we were all sick. So we were all doing the GAPS diet together. We were working with herbalists and Lyme literate doctors and just every practitioner under the roof, every protocol, every root cause. We had addressed it, and we were just feeling at a loss. And by the end, I weighed 80 pounds. I'm 5'7". I could only eat 2 foods, which was boiled meat in meat stock with a little bit of real salt, and then some homemade either sheep yogurt or kefir with a little bit of homemade stevia extract. That was it. That's all I could eat. I thought I was dying. I had extreme pain. My joints hurt. My gastrointestinal issues were just so severe and unmanageable. So it's quite a terrifying time for our family. But all in 1 month, that shifted. I went to see a geneticist because I figured if I'm sick and my children are sick, this has to be something genetic. So I went down the path of working with this geneticist, and he ran a slew of labs on me and sat with me one day and said to me, "Do you have mold in your home?" And I said, "Yeah, everybody has mold in their home. Like, we live in this beautiful old home. Like, there was definitely mold in my home. There was mold in the attic. There was mold, visible mold in the attic, visible mold in the basement. I had a patch of mold in my bedroom that I just kept painting over because I had no idea that mold could be an issue. And so I was taken aback. Oh, mold could cause these issues, but I dismissed it. And luckily, a week later, I was meeting with my holistic psychologist to do some biofeedback and some tapping because I had been having such bad panic attacks and anxiety. And we were talking, and she wanted to know what was going on with my health. And I said, I'm at this point now where I'm ruling out mold or Lyme. I'm ruling out Lyme because it could be Lyme. This could be what's causing all my symptoms. But there's this geneticist who thinks it could be mold. I don't know. And she puts down her paper, her writing pad. She puts down her pen. She takes her glasses off. She looks at me and she says, I want you to leave this appointment. I want you to go home. I want you to figure out if this is mold and rule out Lyme and do what you have to do. And I don't want you to come back until you figure out what's going on. And I said, okay, why? And she's like, well, I had a patient with a lot of the same symptoms as you, and she found out about mold and she dealt with the issue and all of her symptoms went away. And so she said, get this figured out and then let me know if you still need my services. So now I'm like, okay, is this real? I still really had a hard time. Like, this was back in 2014, 2015. There really wasn't anything online talking about mold. None of the kind of functional medicine doctors in the interviews were really talking about this. And within my own education, I hadn't learned this. So I went back home to my husband. I said, do you think this could be real? And he's like, well, I don't know. Let's look into it. Thank goodness. My husband was very supportive. I know now, having worked with a lot of people coaching through mold illness and CIRS, that a lot of partners are not supportive. It's really hard for them to wrap their minds around it. But thankfully, my husband was. And so we ended up going on a little vacation, and all of a sudden my brain fog lifted within like 4 days of being out of the house. And I didn't feel like I was walking around in like VR glasses for the first time in a long time. And I felt a little better. And we got back to the house and my husband said, okay, you know what? Now that we're home, I'm going to go look for mold in the house and see what I find and just see how bad this is. And he went down to the kitchen sink and decided to pull the sink out and check things out. And he found that all of the plywood within the cabinets was completely deteriorated, and there was black mold up the back of the wall and within the cabinet. It was extensive.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite severe. And it scared him enough that he said, okay, I'm going to get you out of this house and we're going to figure this out. I'm like, okay. So it just so happened that a few days later, I had my meeting with the Lyme literate doctor, and he had my lab work already. And so I was sitting with him and he says, well, good news. You don't have Borrelia or any co-infections, but I'm fairly certain you have CIRS. And I'm like, what CIRS? And he explained it to me. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? And he wrote on his prescription pad, Dr. Shoemaker. So I was very fortunate to go have that source guided to me right away from the start. I know a lot of people don't have that experience and they get bounced around and they have a really hard time trying to figure out what's wrong with them. But it was just very synchronistic that this happened for me. And so I started consulting directly with Dr. Shoemaker. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. And so I found a local certified Shoemaker trained doctor to run my labs. And then I'd run them by Dr. Shoemaker with phone consults. I got my diagnosis. I definitely had CIRS. I didn't have Marcons. So we started going through the motions as a family and what we were going to do and looking at the treatment options. And in that time, my husband pulled his crew off the construction sites and they built a tiny home for us in our backyard. So the plan was to get in the tiny house and remediate and renovate the old home and then go from there. The tiny house got built. I got on the cholestyramine and moved into the tiny house. And within the first 2 weeks, my husband's symptoms disappeared. So he had been working on his health and his Lyme picture for a very long time. He'd seen a lot of naturopaths, herbalists. He had done a lot of the medical recommendations, antibiotics. Nothing had worked. Within 2 weeks, all of his symptoms were gone. He's still, to this day, he's never had to drain his knee again. He's never had joint pain, neurological issues. He used to get a lot of rage, and that's gone. All that kind of anxiety issues, everything is completely gone for him. My two sons also had a miraculous recovery. My younger son, his eczema disappeared. And this is years of creams and diets and supplements and just gone within 2 weeks. And my older son, who we were just about to have evaluated to get an autism diagnosis, was sleeping through the night, no more anxiety. His stutter lifted completely. All of their digestive issues completely disappeared. So it was like having new children. I got my son back. It was just miraculous. And for me, it was a little harder. I went through a good 6 months of a lot of learning and a lot of dancing with treatment. So having severe gut issues, I had to really dance with the cholestyramine and how I could take it. I had to start really low and go really slow. And there's a period with treatment where your symptoms flare up because the mycotoxins start coming out of the tissues and into circulation. And that was happening to me. So I'd have to get off it and really dance with treatment. But right away after removing exposure, a lot of my symptoms lifted, and it was a very slow but steady progression. There was a dance, there was ups and downs, there was a lot of dark days. But within 6 months, I was able to start eating more foods, cooked vegetables, smoothies. So I just had a steady progression. I started gaining weight, muscle, my mood lifted. And I'd say within 8 to 9 months, I was back on track. I was getting off my medications and my colonoscopy came back clear for the first time in years. Hormonal issues gone, anxiety gone, being able to sleep through the night. It was miraculous. And so after that experience, of course, when something like that happens to you, you start screaming from the hilltops about what you went through. And finally, I started seeing other doctors, like Dr. Jill Carnahan was talking about mold at that time, which was really great. So I started sharing my experience within the IBD community and trying to get the word out that mold and CIRS is a part of inflammatory bowel disease and autism and Lyme and eczema and other issues. And I really just wasn't able to reach a lot of people at the time. And a lot of people kind of dismissed me. It's hard for people to believe, right? So just went through the motions and just ended up as a family just healing together, which was really a wonderful experience. We moved to Canada and started just rebuilding our lives. And so it wasn't actually until last winter that I had another really bad mold exposure and got sick again. I had to go through the process again of getting a CIRS doctor and getting treatment and a diagnosis and getting back on cholestyramine. And again, I was able to heal again using these tools that I had learned. And that's when I started my page, the Is IBD Mold Toxicity page. And that's where I am now. Actually, I have missed a couple components, of course. I just, I did go back to school to learn more about nutrition and get certified in functional nutrition therapy and environmental health. And in this time, just people have started coming to me, hearing my story and needing coaching. And so I've been doing that. And since people have seen our tiny home that we've built, we've gone on to build 6 more. And I also offer healthy home consulting. This experience of developing CIRS and learning about it and navigating it has shifted my life in so many ways that I wouldn't have expected. So that's just where we are today as a family, having come through it on the other side and healed.
Wow, there's so much there, Alli. First, I want to just really honor your story and your journey, and not just getting through CIRS once, but twice.
Mm-hmm.
That really speaks to your resilience. And there's some things I'd love to go back to in that conversation, that I'm curious about. When you were in college and you had your first gastrointestinal issues, first, that's heartbreaking to hear. How you and your roommate, you're starting college life and you're talking about how you're going to prep for your gastrointestinal tests. I mean, it is heartbreaking. That's a time when people are thinking about what they're going to wear to their next college party, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's very serious topics for people just starting out their life that way. Do you feel like when you look back now, having the knowledge that you have, were you both living in a dorm or a building or something at that time that you feel like both maybe contributed to those symptoms?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't mention that. So the home that we were living in, it was a newer construction home. It was maybe only 4 years old, but it had a lot of water issues. And so whenever it would rain, the water would leak through the roof. So we would have to put pots in certain areas to catch the water. And there was one bathroom that we just had to stop using because whenever we'd use the shower, it would flood downstairs and there was visible mold in the basement. Yeah. So this house was definitely a problem. And of course, you just don't know that mold can cause those issues. So we just didn't even think about it. No one ever brought it to our attention.
It's so interesting. I think the more people that I talk to, this is so common where a lot of us are really attracted to older buildings too. You ended up,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's this romanticized idea, right, of living in this old, beautiful home and preserving something. And I've always lived in like row houses in the different cities that I've gone to. And we just didn't know. It's really wild. I think about the places that I lived in college and the basements. And you're not the only one that I've spoken to where people say, yeah, there was mold on the wall. Why would that be a big deal? Every house has mold. And so there's so many of us out there, I think, that maybe were in college or grew up in that time where it was so commonplace. People didn't know that it was even an issue. Like you painting over the mold on the wall is something that I think a lot of people.
Yeah. With my non-toxic paint.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
How ironic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It
so
is.
common. And I'm so grateful that the knowledge has shifted. And I'm sure with technology improving and the testing and science and health just improving in different ways, it takes time, but it is really shocking when you look back. And I hear this from so many different people. We saw it, we knew it, but why would we think that would be the issue?
That's right. Yeah. I had no idea. And there was one morning I woke up and I went to open up the windows and there was black mold growing on the inside of my curtains in my bedroom, on all of them. I just took them down and I washed them. Right? You just don't know until you know. And then when you know, it's everywhere and you see it and you see the problems and you can make the connections.
I'm also so glad to hear that your children have recovered. So part of my medical background is in speech and language pathology. And I've specialized in pediatrics for nearly 20 years now. I worked with the 0 to 5 population mostly for many years, and then really also saw children in grade school, middle school, in different capacities. And so the more stories that I hear now about children recovering and the symptoms that they're having and the characteristics of autism spectrum disorders and all of the children that I used to work with in the area of feeding, there were children who had lots of gagging and lots of food sensitivities and anxiety around foods and things at a really young age. The light bulbs are starting to go off for me now. Like, wow, what type of home were they living in? Like, is that a missing piece of what needs to come into the speech pathology world?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. There's such a need for education in all fields, right?
Absolutely. And that is going to be a big area to take on, but it is something that is on my mind because bringing awareness into that for therapists, I think would help a lot with the recovery process. So add that to the list of things.
Yeah.
So I want to also talk a little bit about, it sounds like diets and different types of diets have been a part of your journey. And this is a sensitive topic, I think, for people. Diet and food brings up a lot of issues, I think, for people, but it's important, I think, to bring a light on what do you feel like helped you in your situation? What definitely didn't help you? I know you've mentioned you were on a liquid diet for a long time. Where are you now with your relationship with food because of that period of time?
You know what? It's really interesting because I'm just this person who is always leaning towards the positive side. Maybe it's a gift or a curse. I don't know. But when I originally was diagnosed and my symptoms predominantly express as digestive symptoms. And so finding diet that has helped me, because I have tried them all, it's a gift for me. I'm like, wow, this is helping me. And over the years and through education and my education, I've learned that diet is a really, really great tool, but it is not a cure for these illnesses, but it can be used to alleviate symptoms and even somewhat treat certain conditions. So it is a fantastic tool. But if you're someone who needs to remain on a restrictive diet, you need to be looking at why that is. And over the years, for me, I use diet as a marker of success. Right now, I can eat a fairly broad diet. I'm still healing from that last exposure. So there's a few foods that I can't eat right now because they cause me to be symptomatic. But I know as time goes on, I'll be able to bring them back in. And to me, that's a marker of my success. I would now, coming full circle, I wouldn't look at diet as something that I have to do the rest of my life, these certain therapeutic diets or removing certain foods from my diet as something I have to do for the rest of my life. I look at it as, okay, I understand why I'd have to remove lectins or nightshades or oxalates or FODMAPs. I understand why I have to take those out right now, but I'm going to work on what's causing that so that I can bring them back in. And so to me, it feels as though diet has become this amazing tool in my toolbox of other things that I can use to heal. So to me, it doesn't feel restrictive. It's exciting, which is kind of, I know not a lot of people want to hear that because they've been really struggling. And I've been there. Like you said, this winter, I lost tolerance for all foods and I had to go on a liquid diet, just as elemental diet. It's a diet that a lot of people with inflammatory bowel disease use as a way to have a bowel rest, to give their intestines time to heal from the inflammation because it can get so severe that you can't eat. So I had to do that this past winter for about 12 weeks. And there was an easing that and easing off of that where I was taking foods out. So finally I had to say, okay, I've got to do this. And then an easing out where I could then start bringing back in some simple foods. It was a longer period being on the elemental diet, but strictly 12 weeks solely on that, which is really demanding on the body and our emotions. It's also very hard for me as a mother. No matter what my health is doing, I have to get up every day and take care of my 3 boys, one of which is 3 years old. I have to feed them. I have to make them nourishing meals, which I enjoy. I enjoy nourishing my children, but it's hard. It's hard. I can relate to people who are really struggling, but we need to reframe it and say, oh, I'm stuck this way. I can't ever eat oxalate-rich foods. I can't ever eat grains again. I can't ever eat beans again or raw lettuce. We have to rephrase it with this I can't mentality and say why and what can I do to improve here? Because there's just so many things we can do, and just use it as a guiding light to say, okay, why? And what can I do? What's the problem here? And as mold really affects the gut. So for me, obviously I have my mold goggles on, but I find that ultimately mold is a huge root cause with digestive issues. And so addressing mold, really truly removing exposure and addressing the toxicity and healing is a place to start for a lot of people who have been struggling with digestive issues. And so if anything, I hope that gives people hope that are listening who have had really restrictive diets and have had a really rough go with some of these gastrointestinal symptoms. Like, I mean, there was a period where I was waking up every night in my journey and throwing up and just really sick for months and months and months, back in 2014 before I knew that mold was an issue. And there, a lot of other symptoms, just not being able to digest food and so on. So it's really hard, but I do hope that provides people with some hope and knowing that you can heal, you can eventually bring back in all these foods. Sometimes you just need a little push. And I do find that, like in my journey, I had to use a very limited diet. There was a long time, I think it was about 6 months, where all I could eat was the meat stock. So boiled meat and meat stock, which again saved my life during that time while I was being exposed. But there's some people who are eating a carnivore diet for a really long time. And I totally respect people wanting to do that if it's working for them, but there's a lot of people who don't want to do that and they have to do that. And I just want to give them hope and say, you can heal and you can bring these foods back in. You just have to work on addressing those root causes. And like I said, I see mold being the biggest one when it comes to digestive issues.
Dr. Shoemaker always says getting out of exposure, and always comes back to the first step in the protocol.
That's right.
It's really inspiring to hear all of that. I've talked about all my digestive stuff in earlier episodes in season 1. And it's interesting. I'm like you, where I haven't lost hope about being able to bring foods back. I had a lot of resistance to eating and having to take foods out of my diet. And it just felt like another thing I had to let go of. And it's hard and it's difficult to then have to be different in another way. Like you can't really show up in the world as you were. And just that whole social piece of eating together. And it really impacts a lot of different areas of life. But I feel that at some point I'm going to get back to being able to bringing foods in. I really do feel that deep down. And I know that it is a journey. And for me, I am open to doing what I need to do now. But when I look at health and wellness in my life and my goals, eating a variety of foods is my goal.
Yeah.
And so I do also respect those that are doing limited diets and helping their guts to heal in certain ways. But for me, it's about eating meat and fruits and vegetables and a little bit of grains and not having to keep these things off of the table. That's the type of life that I'm hoping to get back to.
That's health freedom, right? And like I said, if you want to stay on those restrictive diets because you feel better and you enjoy it, like I am so happy for you. But for the people that they don't want to be there, it's like you said, it's really, really, really hard. And especially, like you said, the social aspect, it's really challenging. So my heart just goes out to those people. And I hope that I can give you some hope. I eat a very broad diet. I eat raw foods. I do avoid grains just because I haven't really eaten them since 2005, since finding the specific carbohydrate diet, but I eat everything else. And so I just hope people know there's hope there and you can heal and you can eat foods and not feel sick afterwards. It's just treating that root cause, finding out what that is and moving past it.
So what do you wish people in the world knew about CIRS?
Okay, so I really wish that more people knew how devastating this illness is for people. I mean, obviously, I would like to see so much more awareness so people actually believe that mold and other biotoxins exist and are toxic and cause health issues, and that's real. But beyond that, I really would love to see more support for people going through this because it's just so devastating. People have to move a lot. The financial strain is really hard. And it's when you're sick, you want to be at home. You want to feel safe. And realizing that your home is potentially what's causing you to be sick is a really hard thing to go through. And I don't think that many people would know what that feels like until they've been there. So I would just love to see people have more awareness, and I'd love to see more support, especially more emotional and care, more empathy towards us and people like us who are going through this, just so that we can feel a little bit better, even emotionally, just going through the process because it's really hard.
Yeah, that's part of my inspiration with the work that I bring forward too, is the emotional piece is so real and it doesn't really hit home for people until it hits home, whether that's somebody in their immediate family or somebody that they know or themselves starts to see just how many layers and parts of life this illness really hits. You know, it's, as you point to, it's the finances, it's the home that's supposed to be safe, it's the emotional processing of all of that. And everything's happening at once in a body that doesn't feel well and isn't functioning to its fullest potential. So we do really need more awareness and more compassion for this type of population. What do you wish doctors in the world knew about CIRS?
I just wish that doctors, conventional doctors, knew about CIRS and knew about mold. And they just don't. It's just really sad. I have sat with some of the most incredible, well-meaning medical, integrative, functional medicine, naturopaths, herbalists, you name it. And they look at me like I have four heads when I start talking about mold and what it does and what it has done to myself and my family or people that I work with. And it's really sad. So I would just love to see more education for practitioners and within the medical field, more acknowledgement that this is real, because I feel like that's what's stonewalling a lot of progress, and that fact is also what's preventing the general population from believing that this is real. So I think that's a big hurdle that we need to overcome.
How did you end up working with GI doctors and being able to get the care that you needed knowing that you knew you had SIRS, but then having some pretty involved gastrointestinal stuff going on, were you able just to work with both sides, or how did you end up handling that ultimately?
That is such a great question, because gastroenterologists in general are really, really, really hard to work with, because they have one model that they practice. Most of them, not all of them, they are keeping you out of the hospital and keeping you alive. And so what they're offering you with, especially with inflammatory bowel disease, is here's a way to suppress aspects of your immune system so that you can live a somewhat normal life. Or, sorry, there's nothing else. No, diet doesn't work. Supplementation doesn't work. Sorry, there's nothing else for you. And that's really scary. A lot of people go outside of their gastroenterologist and work with other practitioners to work on those other pieces, to lower inflammation with herbs and supplements and diet, and get the diet dialed in. For a long time, I really resented my conventional gastroenterologists, and I did not enjoy working with them at all. And I actually found an integrative gastroenterologist who I worked with named Dr. Chutkan. And she was just absolutely lovely, and she supported me on so many different levels. And so I would recommend that people do that they do allow themselves to find a doctor that they resonate with, that is willing to work with them. We don't have to accept the medical model. We don't have to accept what one doctor is telling us. Go out and seek other advice, seek other opinions, and find other practitioners who can help you with those other pieces, so that your journey is more holistic and more supportive of you. And so that's what I did. But in the end, what I found, and this might be helpful for people who don't have integrative gastroenterologists or doctors in their region, is that you can use them for emergency medicine while still having a complementary approach on the side. I have tried really hard to educate my gastroenterologists on the mold piece. I've tried to explain it. I have literally brought research, peer-reviewed research, to show them, and they start backing out of the room. Like, they don't want to know about mold. They just cannot wrap their head around it. These are the ones that I've worked with. Maybe there are other doctors who would be willing, and I hope so, but this has been my experience. So I've just decided, well, I'm not going to push that piece. They're there if I need them. So if I need the medications, like this past winter, I did need to use several medications because I was in such a bad way. Those tools are available to me. But I know that approaching it with the knowledge of there is something causing this. I know that there is. I know what it is. I'm also going to tackle that piece with my SIRS doctor, with the education that I have around nutrition and supplements. I can bring it all home and get the treatment that I need, so that the medications and the model that my conventional gastroenterologist is helping me gain access to is a temporary means to an end. So that's how I've approached it, working with them. I'm not in a place anymore where I am against them and not accepting their help, because sometimes it's needed. And I think it's important that we have access to that too.
I think that's really well said and really great advice for people. I think when you go through something like SIRS, the bubble bursts that the doctors know everything. You start to realize that they don't know everything and that there are other ways of healing. And my experience with gastroenterology was they looked at some of the markers. They made sure inflammation wasn't getting too out of control. They wanted to make sure nothing obvious was being done. Like, I had a capsule endoscopy done to make sure that there was nothing going on during a period of strong gastritis that happened for me. And they are there for certain acute issues or life-threatening issues, but that they're not going to take the time, most likely, to do the research and piece things together with your SIRS doc.
No, and that's also a really good point.
Unfortunately, it's put on the patient, or you have to be the middle person of, at some point, okay, I realize now this is what my GI can fill. This is the role they can do. And this is the role of my SIRS doctor. So I would like go to my GI doctor and say, hey, I need to have a stool test to look at my pancreatic enzymes and a couple of these, biological possibilities like parasite or things like that, and talk with them and say, like, what do you feel comfortable recommending so that insurance could cover it? And then if they would cover it, then I would go back to my functional or my SIRS doc and say, okay, like we need to fill in the missing pieces here. So it was a lot of pulling things together for me.
Exactly. Yeah. They're so great at helping you rule out things or rule in things. And then you can find those pieces and treat those or rule it out so you don't have to worry about it anymore. So yes, it's just great to work in synergy with them.
And just another tip for people that's coming up for me right now is I sort of gave doctors like a 1 or 2 time chance where I would mention SIRS or what I was reacting to and see if there was any interest or questions asked, and then bring it up again. And then if there wasn't anything coming from them interest wise, or if they weren't open to it, then I would just realize, okay, like this doctor's not going to budge.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to accept that because I can't put more energy into trying to convince a doctor that's already been trained a certain way. So it was a learning process for me though, and I was like, all right, I'll give them like 1 or 2 chances. And even my PCP that I used to have in a different state, my SIRS doctor, it's like one of the top researchers in biotoxin illness, and was very happy to talk with my PCP. And I shared this with him. My physician is willing to have a conversation with you about this so you can understand it. And he never even accepted that.
Wow. Yeah. That's great advice. And yes, because I have wasted a lot of time and energy trying to get doctors and even integrative doctors to come with me on this journey and learn a little bit more. And it's like you said, you just can't put forth that energy to do that. They have their knowledge. They are great in those fields, and we need to utilize it for what it is.
Yeah. And then maybe every once in a while you find that one that's like curious and wants to learn more, and then the door opens up a little bit, but that is a challenge for sure.
It really is.
If you could have one magic wish granted, what would you ask to happen within the current SIRS community?
A wish. Okay. I would love, love, love to see more research being done. I would love if practitioners would share more about their clinical findings, because there's so many pearls there. I would really love conventional research to start doing more root cause studies and trials into what's actually causing these diseases that we say are idiopathic, like inflammatory bowel disease, because we can't treat them effectively until we know what we're treating. And there's just so many diseases out there that could be caused by mold and have some aspects of SIRS. And let's do this. Let's research what is causing them, especially with inflammatory bowel disease. The medications and the treatments available they come with a really big list of side effects, dangerous side effects. People are tired. People are tired of dealing with these diagnoses and not getting the right treatment. So I would just really love to see more research into root causes, and particularly around mold and IBD. And that is part of what I'm doing with my work, is trying to raise awareness and trying to help guide some research or researchers towards studying mold as a root cause for inflammatory bowel disease.
I love that. And I would love to add to that a research study that looks at the role of actinomycetes, the bacteria, alongside the molds, and to see if there's a relationship with that and digestion. Because for me, in my profile, I technically don't react to mold. And my inflammation is coming from actinomycetes and endotoxin exposure. And my digestion has been significantly impaired over the years. And so I think there's even more to dive into the symbiotic relationship of all of that.
Absolutely, because our environment, our gut is not separate from our environment, right? So our gut is a reflection of our environment. And there's so much research right now looking at the microbiome as though it is the root cause, but it's not. Our microbiome is a reflection of our immune health. It's a reflection of what's going on in our environment. You can take a person and move their environment, change them to a new setting, put them in a new home, and that alone will change the microbes within their gastrointestinal tract. So it's this kind of research, just they're looking at like surface level or downstream side effects right now. And they need to go deeper into why. They need to start asking why in order to get the real answers. And I think, like what you said, it's the home, there's the environment. How is the environment affecting these people, affecting their immune system, causing changes within the gut? And I think doing that is where we're really going to start getting answers instead of looking at the changes that are happening. It's asking why.
It would be amazing if there was enough data out there from one of the CIRS doctors, or really if we need to start collecting it in some capacity of testing the environment at the same time that you're doing in-depth GI testing to compare the species and the levels to really be able to show that what are you breathing and what's on your walls is inside of you as well. Yeah, we'll see where things head, but I agree it's such an important piece because there are so many people with CIRS that I hear even get like 75% better, and there's still these digestive pieces to fix, so it's a really big piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. And even within the inflammatory bowel disease community, we can get people 80, 90% of the way there without changing their environment, but they will never get off the supplements. They will never get off the diets. They will always have to be working on their viral load and their parasites and feeding their microbes because they're not addressing what's causing those abnormalities in the first place, whatever that is in their environment, whether it's mold or actinos or other factors. But it's that last little bit, like if we can get them out of that environment, I see people just reach that 100% wellness. So they've done all the other things. They've addressed so many other issues within their body. It's just this last piece. And once they get out into a clean environment, it's usually that last tipping point that gets them to where they want to be, where they don't need to use the supplements anymore. And their immune system keeps their viral load in check. And that's that last piece. I see people improve so much when they move.
My last question for you is, what keeps you hopeful navigating the world with your genetics, with CIRS?
I have 2 copies of the dreaded multi-susceptible genes. So when I was working with Dr. Shoemaker, his advice to me was, once you recover, you need to stay on well call indefinitely because this is such a strong genetic susceptibility here. And I like to say, if I can get well with this genetic susceptibility, others can too. And being aware of my weaknesses, I don't know if I should call it weaknesses, but it has allowed me to create a really, really fulfilling life. Like, obviously, I can't work as a typical interior designer anymore within that industry. So I've had to kind of really rework my career. So I work from home. I work virtually. I do healthy home consulting and tiny home design. And it's been really great making that shift. Now I can be more present. I have the ability to create my own schedule. I'm available to my family when they need me. I have more time to put into myself. So it's just been, sometimes these things that happen to us can shift us in a better direction. And also, I've been really, really, really blessed since going through this process in 2016. That people have started coming to me and I've started coaching people through this. And so I've been so blessed to watch people come to me and they're kind of questioning, well, could mold, my environment, be causing my symptoms? And we start going through the process of elimination. I help them find the correct help and get the right diagnosis. And I am there to hold their hand while they're going through the process. And I have just seen miracles in people, and watching people heal from diseases that are, as far as conventional medicine is concerned, incurable gives me so much hope. And I've seen it within myself and my family and so many people. So if there's one message I would want to put out there, it would just be, don't give up. If things are not working, find out why. And if you're feeling really unwell, potentially look into your environment and ask for help, find the right doctors, and you'll get there. There's a way out. There's always a reason why your body is not well, and your body is there for you. Your body always wants to heal. It's all it knows is healing. Creating inflammation is part of healing. So I just want people to know that there's hope, and there's hope for healing.
Thank you so much, Alli, for sharing your story and your family's story, sharing your heart with everybody, and all of these valuable tips and resources. I know that people are really going to appreciate this and feel really validated and inspired by your story. You really are a CIRS survivor. And thank you so much for giving back to the community and paying it forward to help others. How can people stay in touch with you and work with you if they want to connect?
Thank you so much for all that. That makes me feel really happy. I am available on Instagram through is IBD mold toxicity or just Alli Manzella. Right now, things have been overloaded with the new page, the is IBD mold toxicity page. So I am maxed out with how much coaching I can do right now, but I'm available. And if someone really does need resources, please reach out, please message me. I'm happy to share links. I'm currently working on just a PDF guide so that I can share resources quickly and easily with people so that they can find access to doctors and learn a little bit more about the process and kind of get going on their own, because it is a tricky illness to navigate. But I am working on actually with a group of friends. We're working on trying to get research funded. So if you are interested in helping with research towards inflammatory bowel disease and mold or environmental toxins, please feel free to reach out. If you want to participate or be part of that project, feel free to send me a message and let me know, because we would love to have the help. And it would just be great to connect with more people with the same interests.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and for your kind attention. To keep in touch, follow the Heart of CIRS podcast on Instagram. You can visit melaniepensack.com/the Heart of CIRS to donate. Your generosity helps to keep this podcast growing. May the awareness of CIRS spread far and wide, helping to change millions of lives for the better.